She was cleaning the office, a simple and familiar task that most people don't give a second thought to. The kind of job that requires little more than a broom, a mop, and a steady hand. But on this particular day, as she wiped down the countertops and organized the clutter in the corner, something extraordinary was about to happen. The hum of the vacuum was interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. Not just any knock, but a firm, deliberate knock. She paused, unsure if she had heard it correctly, then continued with her cleaning. After all, the office was relatively quiet, and it wasn't unusual for someone to stop by. But this knock, it felt different. She approached the door and opened it, only to be greeted by a sight she had never expected. There they were, FBI agents in crisp suits, their faces set in grim determination. Her mind raced. What could the FBI want with her? She was just the office cleaner, a woman who kept the place tidy and nothing more. But the agents didn't seem to notice her confusion. They barged past her into the room, their movements quick and purposeful. The air felt heavy with tension, and every second seemed to stretch on endlessly. As they swarmed the office, she stood frozen by the door, trying to make sense of what was happening. Her hands, still holding the mop, seemed to have a mind of their own. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the agents move methodically around the space. They weren't here for the janitor, were they?
No.
She felt small and out of place, a mere observer in a situation she couldn't understand. The question lingered in her mind. What did they know that she didn't? The agents ignored her presence, fully immersed in their search. She could hear snippets of their conversations, phrases like evidence, secure the area, and suspect. Her mind raced, trying to piece it all together. Had she accidentally stumbled upon something? Perhaps a file left out of place, a document carelessly discarded. But that didn't make sense. She was just cleaning. She hadn't touched anything out of the ordinary. Yet, the more she observed, the more she realized this wasn't just a routine visit. There was a sense of urgency in their movements, a level of focus that suggested something much larger was at play. The cleaner's closet, the supply cabinet, the desk drawers, nothing was left unchecked. The FBI agents had come prepared for something significant, and her simple role as the office cleaner suddenly felt insignificant in the face of their meticulous operation. As the investigation unfolded, her sense of unease grew. The agents had now moved to the back of the office, and she stood silently by the door, unsure whether to speak up or stay out of the way. Then, as if on cue, one of the agents glanced over at her. For a brief moment, their eyes met. The agent's expression didn't soften, but there was a flicker of recognition and acknowledgement that she was there, a small part of the bigger picture. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just the office cleaner anymore. She had become a part of something much bigger, something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The FBI wasn't here by chance. She knew exactly who was in the office, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. She had never been more aware of her place in the world, or of how little she truly understood about the forces at work around her. The question now was, what had she unknowingly stumbled into? She had a decision to make. Her first instinct was to leave, to step away from the chaos and retreat to her quiet, familiar corner of the office. But that wasn't an option anymore. The FBI had come for something, and she had been there when it happened. She could feel her pulse quickening, the fear creeping up her spine. What did she know about what was going on? What had she seen? Should she speak up, or should she remain silent and pretend she hadn't noticed anything at all? Her thoughts were racing, and the weight of the situation pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. She had never imagined that a simple cleaning job would lead her here into the heart of a mystery she didn't understand. But now that she was in the thick of it, there was no going back. Whatever the FBI was looking for, It was clear that her role in this strange scenario had only just begun. She had always been just the office cleaner. It was a job that required little more than dedication, a mop, a broom, and a dustpan. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and it gave her the stability she needed. Day after day, she arrived before most of the office workers and stayed after they left. The quiet routine work was something she had grown to appreciate. It was her time to think, to clear her mind as she scrubbed away the remnants of the day before. There was something oddly peaceful about it. She enjoyed the repetitive motion, the way it gave her space to breathe and process the small, sometimes larger, things in her life. Yet, on this particular day, as she began her routine, a strange sensation settled in her gut. Something felt off. It wasn't the usual quiet, the normal hum of the building. She could feel an almost electric charge in the air, but she dismissed it as nothing more than a fleeting thought and pushed ahead with her work as she started wiping down the conference room table. The heavy thud of boots echoed from the hallway. She paused, unsure if she had heard that right. It was too early for anyone to be coming in. Most of the office workers wouldn't arrive for at least another hour, and she had never heard anyone walk with such deliberate steps at this hour. She was used to the normal sound of footsteps, people arriving late or hurrying to meetings, but this was different. The footsteps grew louder, coming closer to the door. She froze, gripping the edge of the table as if that could ground her. Then, without warning, the door to the conference room swung open, and the moment that had been hanging in the air was shattered. Standing there were several agents, FBI agents, she would later realize, dressed in black suits with expressions that were all business. The sight of them, moving with swift precision and purpose, immediately jolted her out of her calm routine. For a split second, she felt like she was in a dream. The reality of the situation seemed to bend, as though the events unfolding around her weren't meant for someone like her. FBI agents in her office. She was nothing more than the person who swept the floors and cleaned the bathrooms. What could they possibly want with her? But their entrance was unquestionable. The lead agent, a tall man with a stern face, glanced at her briefly, his eyes sharp and unreadable, before turning his attention to the rest of the room. She stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Was she supposed to speak? Was she supposed to leave the room? Instead, she remained rooted to the spot, eyes wide, watching as the agents began to take control of the space. Their movement was calculated, precise, no wasted time, no wasted effort. It was clear they had a mission, one that had nothing to do with her. But why was she there, in the middle of it? The agents were quick to secure the room. Papers were flipped through, file cabinets were opened, and they examined every corner of the office with an almost clinical detachment. The woman, still holding her mop, unsure of whether to step forward or retreat, was caught in an unfamiliar limbo. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but it wasn't just the surprise of the situation that made her feel like this. There was something else, a gut instinct telling her that something much bigger was going on here. Something far beyond her understanding. She had no idea what was happening, and even though she was technically a part of the office's operation, she felt like an outsider in this strange, tense environment. As one of the agents passed by, she nervously moved aside to make room, but he barely acknowledged her. He was too focused, too involved in whatever it was they were looking for. It made her feel small, insignificant, and invisible in the very place she had come to call her workplace. For what seemed like hours, the agents scoured every inch of the office. Every file was examined, every drawer emptied. They moved with an efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. At one point, they started asking questions, but not of her. They asked about names she didn't recognize, about locations she'd never been to. The tension in the room grew thicker as the minutes passed. It was clear that the agents weren't here on a casual visit. Their presence felt like an emergency, a race against time. She had never witnessed anything like this before. The quiet office that had once felt like her sanctuary was now a battleground. The agents searching for something or someone. But what could they possibly be looking for? She could sense the danger in the air, but she couldn't figure out why. As the agents continued their search, she stood by the wall, her eyes darting nervously from one agent to another. She wanted to ask them what was going on, but the fear of being noticed or worse, of being involved, kept her from speaking up. The more she watched, the more she realized that this wasn't just any ordinary investigation. There was a deeper layer to it. One agent kept returning to a particular file cabinet, checking it over and over again, as if he was convinced something was hidden there. The others combed the office, pulling out documents, examining their contents, and scribbling notes. They were looking for something specific, but what? What had they come for? The thought gnawed at her. She had never been a part of anything like this before, and yet, here she was, caught in the middle of something she couldn't even begin to understand. Just as she was about to step forward, wondering if she should say something, one of the agents turned to her. 'Twas the same one who had glanced at her earlier. His expression was unreadable, but there was something about his demeanor that told her he knew she was more than just a bystander. She had the strangest feeling that he was going to ask her something, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and professional. "Do you know anything about the file marked Project Shadow?" Her stomach lurched. She had never heard of such a file, and she couldn't imagine why they would ask her about it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her hands trembling as she clutched the mop even tighter. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press her further. Instead, he simply nodded and turned away, his attention returning to the rest of the room. But the question lingered in the air, and her mind raced. What was Project Shadow, and why had they asked her about it? She had no answers, only more questions. The agents continued their search, but her thoughts were consumed with that. One question: was it possible she had seen something? Had she been too close to something she didn't understand? She had always thought of herself as nothing more than the cleaner, someone who passed unnoticed by everyone. But now, standing here in the midst of the FBI's investigation, she realized that she had a role in this story, a role she had never asked for, but one that was now impossible to ignore. The situation was escalating, and with every passing minute, the office became more chaotic. The FBI was closing in on something, and they were doing everything in their power to find it. She still didn't know exactly what was going on, but she knew that her life, her world, had just been irrevocably changed. She wasn't just the office cleaner anymore. No, she had unknowingly become a part of something bigger, a web of intrigue, secrets, and perhaps danger. She could no longer pretend to be just an outsider, watching from the sidelines. The FBI had made sure of that. The question that now hung over her was whether she would simply continue on with her life, or whether she would become entangled in this larger conspiracy. As the agents moved out of the office, taking everything they had found with them, the realization hit her. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somehow, she was going to have to figure out where she fit into all of this. Days passed, but the events in the office continued to haunt her. Each time she walked through the building, it felt different. The air was thick with uncertainty, the hum of the fluorescent lights now more oppressive than calming. The faces of the agents, their cold stares, their deliberate actions, everything about that day had left an indelible mark on her. The simple act of cleaning had taken on an entirely new significance. She no longer looked at the office as just a place where she worked. It had become a battleground, a site of conflict and secrets. She found herself constantly scanning her surroundings, wondering if she was being watched, wondering if there was something she had missed. And yet, the office remained quiet, almost too quiet, as if the events that had unfolded were nothing more than a fleeting moment in time. But deep down, she knew better. The FBI's visit wasn't a random occurrence. She could sense it. It was the calm before the storm. She had to prepare herself for whatever came next, despite her growing unease. Life at the office continued, and she found herself back at the same desk, tidying up the same surfaces. But now, she couldn't help but notice the small things. The way certain files were positioned just so. The whispers exchanged between the employees, the emails being sent behind closed doors. It was as if everything had shifted beneath the surface, and she was now aware of the undercurrents she had once overlooked. Her world had become a puzzle, and she was desperately trying to piece it together. But the more she observed, the less she understood. Was she just imagining things, or had the FBI's visit really changed everything? Her mind often wandered back to that moment when the agent had asked her about Project Shadow. The words echoed in her thoughts like a mantra, growing louder with every passing day. She had tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a passing inquiry, a question they had likely asked everyone in the building. But deep down, she knew better. They had asked her for a reason. Had she seen something that day? Had she stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to? She didn't have the answers, and she wasn't sure if she wanted them. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that by remaining silent, she might be complicit in something much larger. But if she spoke up, would she be dragged into something dangerous, something she couldn't escape from? The weight of the decision pressed down on her. The truth was, she didn't know who she could trust anymore. Everyone she had once viewed as a colleague now felt like a stranger. She couldn't shake the feeling that the very people she had cleaned up after might be involved in something far more sinister than she could imagine. As the days wore on, she found herself in a moral quandary. Should she continue to stay quiet, going about her business as usual? Or should she reach out and try to understand what was really going on? Could she handle the truth? She didn't. No. The thought of digging deeper into the mystery made her stomach churn. But the idea of remaining passive was almost just as unbearable. It was a choice between knowledge and ignorance, a choice between being part of something or staying on the sidelines. The uncertainty gnawed at her, turning her once peaceful workdays into a battleground of internal conflict. She knew she had to make a decision, and soon. One day, after hours, the office was eerily quiet. Everyone had left for the day, leaving behind a stillness that felt unsettling rather than peaceful. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond her reach, something she was meant to uncover. And so, for the first time since that day, she decided to act. She stayed behind, waiting for the office to clear out before slipping into the back rooms. Her heart raced as she approached the locked file cabinets that she had seen the agent scouring. She knew the combination, as it had been part of her job to manage supplies and inventory. She had never thought much about the contents of the cabinets before, but now, her curiosity pushed her forward. The air in the room felt heavy as she unlocked the drawers one by one. Papers and folders spilled out, their contents mostly mundane expense reports, office memos, and meeting notes. But one folder caught her eye. It was marked with the words Project Shadow, the same name the agent had asked about. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't supposed to be looking at this. It was wrong, dangerous even, but she couldn't help herself. This could be the moment she had been waiting for. She opened the folder, her hands trembling. Inside, the contents were even more chilling than she could have imagined. The documents were classified, filled with codes, names she didn't recognize, and references to places she couldn't identify. But the most shocking thing was the mention of someone she knew, someone who had worked in the office long before she arrived. The connection was undeniable. This wasn't just a random investigation. The office had been at the center of something far bigger than she had realized. The documents hinted at illegal activities, covert operations and shadowy dealings that went far beyond the confines of the office walls. She read, and her mind struggled to process the information. What was she looking at? Was this real? Could it be possible that her quiet, everyday office had been a front for something as dangerous as this? The decision to investigate further was not one she made lightly, but once the door had been opened, there was no going back. With each passing moment, the weight of what she had discovered began to settle in. She could feel her world closing in around her, as if the very walls of the office were pressing in on her. The documents, the names, the secrets, they had exposed her to something she couldn't unsee. She was no longer just the office cleaner. She was now a part of the story, whether she wanted to be or not. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that speaking out could have serious consequences. She could be dragged into something much larger than herself, something with far-reaching effects. But remaining silent, ignoring the truth, seemed like a betrayal of everything she had ever known. She found herself standing at a crossroads, caught between the need to protect herself and the desire to do what was right. Should she expose what she had learned? Should she go to the authorities, risk her life and everything she had worked for in the name of justice? Or should she walk away, leaving the secrets behind, and pretend like she never saw a thing? The choice was not an easy one, and she felt the weight of it every moment. But one thing was clear: the truth had a way of revealing itself, no matter how hard one tried to hide it. She couldn't ignore what she had seen, and it was becoming impossible to stay silent. The next morning, she arrived at the office earlier than usual, her mind heavy with the burden of the decisions she had to make. The documents she had found lay heavy in her bag, and the knowledge of what they contained gnawed at her every step. As she entered the office, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. She wasn't just a cleaner anymore. She had become part of a larger narrative, a narrative that threatened to consume her. The question now was how she would navigate this new reality. Would she speak up and risk everything, or would she bury the truth, protecting herself and her life from the dangerous world that lurked just beneath the surface? As the office door closed behind her, she understood one thing for certain: life had changed. Forever, the truth was out there, and now it was up to her to decide whether to face it or run from it. The FBI might have walked into her office that day, but it was she who had unknowingly walked into a web of lies, secrets, and shadows, a web she could never escape from. If you found this story gripping and want to see how the truth unfolds, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. What would you have done in her shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on the situation. And remember, the truth is often stranger than fiction. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware.